Yes, this. And first of all, I must tell you that Maarja is a research fellow at the University of Tartu, and she graduated from this university. Her field of interest is, first of all, transmedia studies and cultural literacies, cultural value of transmediality, and semiotics in general. I would say that the great privilege of all of us is to work in this sphere where we can beforehand become our questions, our comments. All of you got the paper. Maarja Ojamaa gave us as a preliminary reading for her lecture today. So the plan is that Maarja, first of all, gives her lecture, and then we will have about 40 minutes or half an hour of discussion, and everyone will be able to put questions or to comment on the paper of Maarja. Maybe it is important to say, and that will be the end of my own speech here, it is important to say that Tartu, the University of Tartu, is not only a very important Estonian university or university on the territory of the former Russian Empire and the former Soviet Union, it is also a very, very important academic center of semiotics. And if Maarja could give us a couple of words about Yuri Lotman and semiotics at the University of Tartu, we would be very grateful. Anyway, Maarja, thank you very much for your paper. We are waiting for your speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghassan, for this introduction, and also thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here tonight with you, despite having caught some sort of virus. Luckily, the test says it's not the virus, but my voice is a little bit strange. But if anything is unclear, just you can always stop me and ask me to repeat. And of course, this opportunity to discuss one's work in a multidisciplinary community or people from other disciplines is very exciting. And I was just genuinely very curious to learn about your take on this, or perspective on the concept of semiosphere. And I appreciated every single statement, including, of course, the ones that just confirmed that they didn't understand any of it. So as I go along, I try to explain some of the things, at least some of the things that you asked. But first, yes, I will briefly and of course selectively introduce our take on this digital semiosphere, and then we can go into this discussion. I have also a slide about Lotman, which is after the slide introducing myself. Maybe I can just share the screen. And okay, it says that I can't share because I don't have the desktop app. Is this true?
Yes, this is probably a problem that you are not able to share if you open your presentation or if you open WebEx via your browser.
Okay, shall we take the time for me to download the app or continue without slides?
Yes, I guess it's sensible if you need your slides, then we take about a couple of minutes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of it. Sorry.
Don't mind.
Download the app then. And yeah,
I have the suggestion that otherwise you could send it to Clemens, for example, the presentation. And
maybe it's quicker. Is this keynote format okay? Or I will put it into PowerPoint. Okay.
You can send it to my email. I sent you my email address below in the chat, and then you can just transfer it, and I will open it for you.
Okay. Okay, it's already open on the background. I will just rejoin.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah.
While we are preparing for the presentation, I would like to encourage all participants to put their questions or comments on the chat board, or just to maybe, if Maarja has nothing against it, to maybe even to interrupt with a sign of reaction here. Let us use this space, this virtual space, as much as possible.
Can you open it right now, Maarja? We do not hear you anymore. I don't know what's the problem, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry about not reacting, but
There is something with the sound, with the tone.
yeah. This is just the wrong tool for such an online lecture. We already struggled with it some 2 weeks ago with your presentation, Gassan.
Yes.
Remember this? And now we have the same mess again. I hope she soon re-enters, and then we can continue.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
now I sent my, because there was still a problem with this app. I couldn't share my screen without doing some special things before.
Okay.
That's why I sent my slides to Gusan.
To Gassan. Okay.
Ah.
Do you have the desktop version where you can open?
No,
Otherwise, you have to forward it to me.
yes, but I don't see it. Wait a minute. I will see if it is in my post box.
Digital Wonderland.
Yeah, wait a minute. Das verstehe ich nicht. Hab noch nichts. I haven't yet got it. Wait a minute. You sent it via Gmail, yes?
No, from my university mail, but to yours Gmail.
To my Gmail. Don't.
But I don't have Clemens's email. Maybe I can send to him as well.
Yeah, I tried to send it.
Oh, now I got it. Now I got it. I will just transfer it to. Yeah. I hope it works, because I cannot share my my screen.
You cannot share your screen either? Okay.
Yeah. I just I sent it to you.
Okay. I hope that I can open it and share it. Then let's see.
Okay.
Did you already forward it to me, Gasa?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I did not receive anything yet, but I hope that soon comes.
There was short. Maybe it's going via, I don't know, California or something. Did you get it?
Not yet.
It's not very small, of course, but
I believe it's not too small. Yeah. We hope that it soon comes.
But now we really see that Semiosphere does exist, because this space, we need time in order to stay in this place, in this space. Did you get it?
No, did not get anything yet. I'm sorry about that. I check my junk mails, I check incoming mails, but did not receive anything yet. Now, here we go. Here it is.
2 minutes ago. It's unbelievable how
I got it. I just have to open it. Start.
yeah, the first slide is a photo of me on an exotic beach, so we cannot do without it. That's what I wanted to show. So the second one, right?
This one. Okay.
No, the one before it. This
one.
is already about introducing Lottmann, but okay. So yeah, when I said I will introduce our approach to the digital semiosphere, then by our I meant beside myself also Professors John Hartley, Professor Emeritus from Curtin University, Australia, and Professor Indra Kibrus, who is from Tallinn University, Estonia. And yeah, this is a photo of us in Western Australia on the day that we started writing our book on the digital semiosphere, culture, media, and science for the Anthropocene. So if any of you is a bit more interested in the things that I'm talking about today, you're welcome to check out this book. And also recently in this Nordic Journal of Media Studies, we published a paper which is in a bit more say compressed form and applied on this COVID conspiracies and climate justice movement also mediates these ideas. But to get to our today's talk, I would perhaps start also before also introducing Lottmann, I'd start perhaps with a little bit provocative claim. I don't know how you see it, we can discuss, but the claim is that so far economics, political, technological, and social sciences, they have all expected to influence the world, but they don't take serious account of culture and semiosis, which nevertheless make the world go round. It's because human ways of operating in this world stem from systems of value and meaning. And there has been a kind of divide between disciplinary knowledge systems that study global political or global digital powers and global digital culture, on the other hand. So on the one camp, there is this digital upside and it's about economic influence. And on the other hand, with those digital culture studies, it's about this downside and identities. And our contribution suggests that a systemic approach is needed, integrating these perspectives, and the systemic approach to this creation of meaning and hence knowledge, and by the whole species across the whole planet, is the analytical minimum needed to understand what's going on around us. And where we got our idea from is indeed from the thought of Yuri Lotman and from the other members of the Tartu Moscow School of Semiotics of Culture. Now, could you put on this slide showing a photo of Lotman? And there are also some covers of his works that have been translated to English. Of course, by no means all of his work has, but here are some books, and there's also this one book in Russian indicating this the paper that we're talking about today. And yeah, so a couple of words about Lotman. So Yuri Mikhailovich Lotman was born in 1922, which means that we'll be celebrating his centennial next year. So you're welcome to join those celebrations. We have all sorts of academic and non-academic events happening in Estonia and in other parts of Europe. And yeah, he was born in St. Petersburg, and he graduated with a diploma in philology, also in St. Petersburg, which by then was already named Leningrad, of course. But he couldn't get a job in his home university due to his Jewish origin. And then came along a course mate who helped him to get a job in Tartu. And Tartu was a relatively peripheral place in the Soviet Union back then, which meant that certain things were possible there that the core prohibited. And semiotics, being quite a suspicious thing, maybe could flourish only in Tartu. And that's what Lotman himself has said, that his thought is very much connected to the place where he lived and where he worked, which is this town of Tartu. And of course, Tartu University from 1632, a very old one. And there's this saying that is very much repeated, or very often repeated, that he said that he's respecting the walls of the university so much that he would give a lecture even when there's no students in the hall, just for the university. And yeah, and of course, the school that he established, that is now rather called as the New Tartu School, carried on by his students, but still his thought is very much present also today. We have got this department of semiotics, and we're teaching semiotics in BA, MA, and PhD levels today in Tartu. Yeah, when we get back to the school of the semiotics of culture, it's theoretically and methodologically founded on the Soviet structural linguistics and literary science. But in the wider picture, their thought was also shaped by a plethora of authors from Russian formalism and Prague linguistic circle, including Roman Jakobson, Vladimir Prop, Bachtin, Malinovsky, Helmslow, Chomsky, Wiener, Claude Lévi-Strauss, etc. And also perhaps what's important is that the school didn't exist officially as in some sort of official institution. As I said, semiotics was a bit suspicious. And in this sense, the school operated via co-publications and via meetings, and not as an official institution. And it's been called also an invisible college. And here, this red one on the screen you see is this journal, which they have established in 1964. Today it's called Science Systems Studies. And as such, it's the oldest journal, regular journal on semiotics in the world. just because today it is this annual, published annually, international peer-reviewed journal, but back then it was, of course, in Russian. So Lotman passed away in 1993, which was a year when the internet was by no means a globally common household thing. And digital culture in its contemporary form existed only in some wild predictions. But nevertheless, we'd claim that Lotman's thought is now more relevant than ever before. And this concept that has found most application is that of the semiosphere, definitely. Semiosphere, the analytical minimum of semiosis, we would say. So semiosis is the process of meaning making. And it has been quite commonplace to approach meaning making by starting with a concept of an individual sign, right? And then describe also semiotics as the science studying science, which is perhaps not the most adequate way of putting it. From the Lotman's point of view, we should turn the perspective around. An individual sign has a meaning and a function in and only within a sign system, and a sign system needs to be immersed in the semiosphere, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't function. And here you've got 3 quotes, 2 from Lotman's different works and 1 from Kalevikul, a biosemiotic working today in Tartu, which all utterance the similar idea that the starting point of any semiotic system is not an isolated sign, but a relation between at least 2 signs, but actually, of course, more. And these have to be immersed in the semiosphere, in the semiotic space. And also the unit of semiosis is the whole semiotic space. Or as Kalevi has put it, neither a sign, an organism, or a text, or a culture can exist alone, singly. It always requires another in order to exist, to live. So the system, the environment ensures a meaning to the individual sign. And that is very different from how the classics of semiotics, like Charles Sanders Peirce or Ferdinand de Saussure, approach this meaning making, And even more broadly, there has been a habit in philosophy, science, and human knowledge or human discovery more generally to work from the simple, singular, linear towards greater complexity, multiplicity, and dynamics. When in reality, we'd claim the latter features explain the former, right? We must change our stories of individualistic origins and linear cause-effect relations to match the reality of global systems, which evolve systems before specimens, as paradoxical as it might seem. So Yuri Lotman's son, Mikhail Lotman, who's also a cultural semiotician, has referred to these chicken and egg questions, which are a bit similar, like which came first, chicken or egg, biologically, life or DNA, semiotically, sign or its meaning. These are wrong questions in relation to complex, dynamic, evolutionary systems, like human culture is. And such systems do not work that way. They need both at once. A dynamic multiplicity, the existence of the other, right? And yeah, this is perhaps the main message of this semiosphere whole paper. But now let's get digital. So what do we mean by digitality or digital? We mean a constellation of phenomena that now dominate, let's say, information or knowledge society, where converged and integrated computational technology, internet, artificial intelligence drive not only the mediated culture, but also politics, economics, military, but also, of course, the mediated culture at personal, corporate, and international scale. And while within cultural semiotics, it has been sometimes disputed if it is necessary to theorize this digital semiosphere as a distinct semiosphere from the rest of the semiosphere. There's, after all, one single global semiosphere. And also a number of you asked about it. So I'd explain a little bit this, that we can indeed distinguish between a semiosphere and the semiosphere. The semiosphere being this abstract space that facilitates all communication and semiosis, and which encompasses all languages and utterances. While we can use the model of the semiosphere also to study smaller units, like individual cultures or subcultures, communities, a year group at college, stand-up comedians in New York, bankers in Frankfurt, etc., etc. They all use different means of expression to model the realities in their everyday. And as the same Kalevi Kull has claimed, or put it eloquently, semiosphere is the region of multiple realities. So yeah, there is the semiosphere that includes a huge variety of modeling realities, and each of them can be described and analyzed as a semiosphere. So the semiosphere refers to all human cultural communication across the planet and throughout time, which is a big unit. But we can use it as an analytical model to analyze smaller units. And also my supervisor and cultural semiotician, Professor Peeter Torop, has put that the phrase that perhaps clarifies it also, the phrase semiosphere is studied by means of the semiosphere is not a paradox, but it points to this dialogue between the research object and the description language. So we can study semiosphere by means of the semiosphere. It's both an object and a meta concept. Now, we can discuss digital culture as a digital semiosphere because there are some specifics to its operating and characteristics that distinguish it from the analog cultures or analog semiospheres. And three of these that we put out in our book are the consciousness of global usness, digital traces, and machine agency. So first, this digital communication technology has enabled, let's say, ordinary people, whoever these are, but you get the point, ordinary people for the first time in history to actually be conscious of planetary culture and communication in real time. So, and to participate in it directly. So it's no longer weird or dangerous to know what is happening on the other side of the world as it unfolds. And it's easy for anyone with access to internet. Just maybe a simple idea or example of what this brings along. When perhaps at least some of you remember this Black Lives Matter movement and the action they organized on Instagram, which brought along lots of activity and sharing black screens by young Estonians. And of course, the problems that this movement turns attention to are extremely important and they need attention. But it's relatively telling that there are also lots of social injustice physically much closer to these Estonian young people. You name it, the situation of the Russian minority, the situation of the single mothers, but these never get such attentions. The problems occurring in a way at that time in maybe physically much further distance are somehow mentally much closer to the young people in this Instagram sphere. So instead of some sort of, let's say, patchwork of separate cultures, the digital semiosphere demonstrates the extent to which there is now one self-knowing human culture of global extent. And this feeling of global usness has previously come along only with global threats like nuclear war, for example, but now it's commonplace also in this most intimate everyday. Secondly, these digital traces. Digital communication and culture leave traces, not only the texts that have been digitized or created digitally, but also we've heard about conversations being datafied, but also usage metadata. We know who, when, for how long, in which sequence, read, watched, listened to something, etc. And this data can be recovered for observation and analyzed in ways that situated cultural communication cannot. And now, thirdly, this machine agency, or this digital semiosphere belonging to a machine age. Already now, the texts we are consuming for understanding our life and the world around us, some of them are produced by computers or machines. But most of all, what kind of information gets to us via social media platforms, for example, which is the #1 source of info about the world for very many people. This is already decided by machines and algorithms. Unlike it was in pre-digital times, when such information was sourced in some human curation organized within professional knowledge systems, such as newspapers, for example. But yes, to get perhaps the things more specifically and our vision of this digital semiosphere, I will introduce very briefly 3 levels, micro, meso, and macro, that we discuss in our book. So micro pertains to cultural texts, meso to institutions and cultural subsystems, and macro to the planetary systems. And before that, it's perhaps important to mention the concept of isomorphism in Lotmanian semiotics, which means structural similarity or structural sameness. So namely, Lotman attributed similar structural and functional characteristics to all meaning-making systems. So from a text, a book, for example, to larger ones, such as social networks, to finally the whole humanity. So all these can be analyzed as semiosphere and function isomorphically. And furthermore, actually, it's been elaborated by some authors widened, let's say, to all living systems, not only human cultural formulations. In biosemiotics, for example, semiosis is seen as this distinguishing characteristics of life in general, life as such. So in this sense, we can perhaps stretch the semiosphere accordingly to include all living forms. And our colleague in Tartu, Timo Maran, has also written about this ecosemiosphere. And it's definitely important also from the human perspective to understand humans and other life forms in integrated frameworks, because our life depends on the life of other life forms, right? But now, yes, let's get to this micro scale of analysis of the digital semiosphere. So in this framework, we cannot escape this notion of text, even though it seems to belong to some other eras. And now we've got this dynamic and multimodal digital sphere, but text is still the main analytic unit in Lotman's semiotics, which has its specifics. So the main 3 characteristics are first, being expressed through a sign system. And this sign system can be verbal, can be visual, can be multimodal, etc. The text is bounded, which means that it has, for example, a painting has a frame and a novel has a beginning and an ending. etc. There are different sorts of boundaries, but the function of the boundary is to close off the text from the rest of the cultural continuum. Every text has to have some sort of boundary. And thirdly, being structured, which means that the text's compositional elements need to be hierarchically related. So there are hierarchically higher elements and lower elements. And those positions, of course, can change through time. But this having a structure, a hierarchical structure, is a must. And so this concept is neutral in relation to any particular sign system. So we can textualize or analyze as a text any communicational object, just in order to render it empirically analyzable. And this can include, for example, a single YouTube video, but we can also textualize the whole YouTube platform, which is then expressed as a specific combination of audiovisual, visual, and verbal sign systems. It's bounded by the domain, and its structuredness is reflected, for example, on the landing page, where the algorithms, according to your viewing history, position certain videos above others, as well as the ways that the current video is related to those related videos, to the comments, and the other ways of interacting with this content. And the boundaries of texts, but also of media in the digital semiosphere are, we might say, growingly elusive. So the individual texts and individual media appear to converge into new wholes. Like when we read a novel and watch a film based on it, especially when we do it in the opposite order, we cannot really distinguish in our memory which element came from which. They kind of blend into one new whole. And in the case of those transmedia storytelling, that's really taken on in the digital sphere, is all the more so. It's kind of the whole is in a way composed of individual parts, but when we know all of them, they become like one new whole in our memory. And also on the level of media, for example, the phenomena of book talks, or the literature-related content on TikTok, or Insta poetry, or, for example, video games that are based on some sort of literary sources. We might say that these are different literature, and these social media platforms and video games are two different media systems. But on another level, and the way that they're functioning in culture, they are both parts of one larger whole, right? We might say that actually those social media platforms are part of literary culture today. They're like blending into one. And such part-whole dynamics were really in the focus also for the Tartu Moscow School writings. Yeah, and of course there are extremely many more examples, especially when we're talking again about this cultural memory, and take some, I don't know, some very canonical text like Romeo and Juliet that we have as a play, but we have cinematic versions, we have them abridged versions on YouTube, very small videos. We have experimental dance, Japanese manga, etc., etc., etc. And these can, in a way, also be perceived as very different things, but also as repetitions of the familiar story in new languages. And this, through such transmedial recursivity, they achieve some sort of stronger inclusion and attachment into this, what Anne Rigney has called the working memory of culture, which in turn shapes the contemporary identities of cultures. Now, when these characteristics of boundedness and structuredness refer to some sort of structural aspects of the text, then the three functions on the next slide bring on some sort of dynamic dimensions of the treatment of text in Lotman's works. So these functions largely coincide with the functions that Lotman attributes to a thinking system or thinking mind or intellect. And the three are transmission, creation, and memory or preservation. And when we look at these in the context of texts, what has been mostly studied is the way that texts transmit information or mediate constant information. But Lotman was much more interested in the ways that texts create new information and preserve previous information. So, for example, on the next slide, we have a painting by Edvard Munch, right? And when we put it or view it in an online catalog, let's say, then it's simultaneously first a transmitter of information, for example, the impressive color of the sunset near Oslo, or an artistic vision of anxiety. This is transmitted by this painting, but it's also a recorder of visual, cultural continuities that underlie the formation of European identity. And also, it's a creator of new information when it's juxtaposed with new texts and new contexts. So this very popular emoji is but one example. There's one element from that painting inserted into another context, another medium, and it takes on an entirely new meaning. And these functionalities are there due to the text's immersion in the semiosphere. So as opposed to existing in separate structures connected only through intertextual links, they can be there only because of the semiosphere. And related to this is Lotmanian understanding of the activity of reading. And as text can be expressed in any medium, by reading, he also means also watching, listening to, right? It can be about consuming, if you will, any medium. It can be read a painting, for example. And reading is a process of dialogue with the text and not decoding. That's exhaustive decoding of the text. So the text appears as an intellectual partner in this process of reading, unlike what has become familiar from the works of Stuart Hall, for example, and others, of course. And decoding is made even perhaps less obvious or straightforward by the fact that in Lotmanian treatment, texts are always dually coded, at least. So an example is that when we have a good command of German language, this does not automatically bring along the situation that we understand everything that is written in German, right? For example, when we take a poem, we also need to understand the sign system or the language of poetry. Just knowing German is not enough, so, because texts are always at least dually codified. It presumes the understanding of at least two languages. And this alternative view of reading, quite importantly, also leads to an understanding that creativity is not sourced in an individual author, but it's sourced in or within culture. So we need readers, we need interpretation and dialogue in order for something to appear creative. And we can discover as if new meanings and new dimensions while stepping into dialogue with very old texts in new cultural contexts. So the contact with cultural memory provokes newness and innovation. So classical example, take how European Renaissance rediscovered classical Greco-Roman texts and ascribed entirely post-medieval European meanings to them. So the border between ancients and moderns proved to be a semiotic hotspot, but the ancients did not dictate the meaning of modernity, even though they were very much present there. So this is very briefly, perhaps, the functions and structure of texts on this micro scale. But when we get on to this mesoscale, or the institutions, then the concept that I would bring out is the one of auto-communication. But yeah, the semiosphere theory also helps us to interpret the socio-cultural dynamics, the ways that people and institutions organize and reorganize themselves to produce and distribute the texts on the micro level. And one of the distinctive features of the semiosphere concept is this analytic focus on how various kinds of communities are forming in the society and culture, and how they are creating self-referential discourses and sign systems that distinguish themselves from others, be it other ethnicities, other industries, other arts, etc. And such self-descriptions are, we might claim, or Lotman has claimed, these are the most universal feature of all cultures. And this strive to create self-descriptions stems from this capability and need to auto-communicate, to communicate with oneself, about oneself, in order for a better understanding of oneself. So when communication presumes a sender and a receiver who are situated in different spots in space, even if they're very close to each other, then auto-communication presumes different spots in time. So there's this very simple example of auto-communication would be a shopping list, which you write down yourself for yourself to read at another point in time when you're in the shop. But when you look at this institutional level, then the most explicit self-descriptions would be most clearest examples, like official histories, codexes, etc., that strengthen the continuity through time. But methodologically, actually, it's possible to regard any act of communication between also distinct sender and receiver as an act of auto-communication, just on the next level of abstraction. So to clarify, maybe we can switch to the next slide, which there's this example that I borrowed from the work of Estonian scholar Madis Järvekülg, who studies online music communities. So when this meme is posted in a Facebook group of music lovers, then it's on the one hand a message from one member of the group to other members of the group. But on the other level, it's also about positioning the whole group in response to this datafication and platformization of music markets. So on the one hand, it's just a joke, just for fun. But on the other hand, it's self-description. Who are we? Yes. And when these discourses of auto-communication and self-description are more responsive to the existing cultural milieus, then they tend to replace the formerly dominant ones. And that is this level of analysis enables us also to look at the power asymmetries among existing formations and the dynamic change of these asymmetries. And the fact that these auto-communicative processes are increasingly mediated by the digital networks means that they are also increasingly international, faster, and more intensive. That much at this point about this meso level. And now we've got also this macro scale of analysis, Semiosphere as the global system, which leads us to actually to this Anthropocene concept, right? And on the one hand, Semiosphere is not like other global spheres in that it does not seem to be a source of energy, right? Unlike geosphere and biosphere. And that's why the sphere of meaning is very often thought as somewhat immaterial as opposed to material. And but still, it needs to be considered at the same time in terms of material sphere, because it's increasingly clear that the Semiosphere has a transformative impact on both bio and geological matter energy, because humans use their knowledge and cultural practices to transform both matter and life into resources or energy, so much so that the present time has been termed, or be the tipping point, turning to the Anthropocene epoch, where human activity transforms the biochemical makeup of the planet. And this wider perspective, considering the whole global operations as some sort of one unified system, or having the systematic approach, we could bring it down from this very global level to this digital sphere, and turn once again to Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. And he has concluded in one article that we must remember and understand that an open platform of such scale requires regulation to prevent the web being weaponized at scale. We have to, as he says in this quote, we have to grit our teeth and hang on to the fence, and to not take it for granted that the web will lead us to wonderful things. And our take on this, and our proposal in the book, is that a semiospheric approach that foregrounds simultaneously diversity and dialogic unity is a good ground for contemplating the proper ways of regulating the sphere. Right. And maybe with this message, I will conclude the monologue. And if there are some questions that I did not answer yet, you're most welcome to ask them.
Thank you very much, Maarja, for your paper, and